Hey everyone, Genome here. For today's short little episode, I'm going to answer the call of a fellow YouTuber who has just started a 500 subs contest. That YouTuber is Jerno's Comics and Pop Culture. You have to forgive my voice or any general croakiness that I have. I'm pretty under the weather right now. But in fact, I'm going to take me a sip of tea. Try to clear up a little bit. And if I'm feeling sporting, I'll edit that out. In any case, Jerno put it out there that he had a few stipulations for entering the contest other than just being a subscriber, which I am. There's actually 3 pieces to this. The first piece is to name your favorite character in comics with special emphasis on what is your current favorite in comics. So that might necessarily be the same as it was when you were younger. The second piece is to name your favorite artist from the 70s or 80s. Which I had a pretty hard time with because the later 80s and early 90s were the height of my comics collecting, so there was a lot of them to go through. I had to open up the box and go through some of the vault back there, but now actually I've modified this stipulation just slightly, but we'll get to that one when I get to number 2. And the third part is to tell, or preferably show, a favorite hobby outside of, the realms of geekdom that we all reside in here. So basically not a comic enterprise, something that is just far removed from that little medium. So without further ado, let's get on to number 1. My number 1 favorite character in comics was, and still is, the Punisher. I realized that a bunch of Marvel movies that came out, that might change my current taste in heroes, but really he's always been the first, and he'd probably always be my last and favorite. Yeah, it's the Punisher. He actually had movies out way before a lot of the Marvel mill got rolling, starting with Iron Man. But Punisher had Iron Man beat by many years, and in one case, I believe 15 years or so, in the case of the original Punisher with Dolph Lundgren in it, which I have not seen since probably a year after its release or so. So yeah, it's the Punisher. Now, I'm going to link this video into his comments. I'm also going to add another link to a video I shot on my favorite hero and villain, and it goes very in-depth of why I like them, and I figured there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. So if you want to see the full-on answer to this, you just look at the link below this one, and it'll go into a much more thorough dissertation of my favorite comic book heroes and or villains. So, and it also has a whole list of runners-up on each side of the spectrum. So there you go check that one out. Now, getting to my favorite artists from the 70s and 80s, here's how I kind of adjusted the stipulation here. I'm going to go with long-term penciler and inker duos. Because there's a lot of solo artists out there who are just incredible. Now, when it comes to just a solo artist, it's pretty hard to deny who I think was probably the best back then, and it's not even really a contest, and that was Jim Lee. He did a lot of his work towards the later part of the 80s. He was on some of the very early issues of my favorite comic, The Punisher, specifically the Punisher War Journal. And I'll just hold a few of them up here for you to see that has his artwork all over it. The first issue I'll show you also has the contribution by Carl Potts, but Jim Lee took care of the rest of them in this little series, and it was just a great run for Punisher War Journal in general as it was. So let me just run these by you real quick. And hopefully this lighting is not too blinding, getting reflections off the cases. I'll have the other ones taken out. And probably my favorite cover he's ever done. Now this is just talking about Jim Lee's run with Punisher. He, of course, had I'm sure some people have heard of it, a fairly prosperous run with the X-Men. So who was probably my favorite overall artist and inker? I'd say that duo probably has to be Rick Levins and Danny Belandi, specifically on their Captain America run, which they had for quite a while. Jerno mentioned Sal Buscema is having a great run on Captain America, and it's very true. I actually thought about mentioning him, but since he already did it, then I decided I'll just go with some other people. But yeah, he was also real notable too. For Captain America specifically, Ron Lim also did a hell of a job on it. I think I have one here. Here's a couple from Ron Lim. The one thing I like about Ron Lim is I believe he did the best version visually of Crossbones. I love the way he draws Crossbones. But as far as Levins and Belandi's expertise on the book is just, I don't know, it's hard to explain how good he was at him. While he may not have had as much facial expression as some of the other artists would give, like say Captain America, he really captured Cap's athleticism and dare I say gymnastic ability, because every basically cover he's on, he is doing some sort of acrobatic move. So he really captured the grace and the prowess of Captain America really well that most other artists couldn't keep up with. He kept Captain very proportional. I mean, he's obviously muscle bound, but he didn't get obscenely big. He didn't have the enormous bulging biceps and the the overbearing chest that sometimes he was placed with later on, or with some other artists. So yeah, he was real good with Cap in the series. So I'll just run a couple of them by you. And like I said, he and Belandi were just great together, and actually Belandi rolled over into some Ron Lim stuff too, and yeah, it was just a great little team up. So here's just a couple. I took these out of the case, so hopefully these won't blind you. And he's another one that that draws Crossbones real well. He looks like a great character. One done by Rick. If you see just how acrobatic each and every one of these covers has Captain America depicted as. But anyway, kudos to you, Mr. Levins and Mr. Belandi. Yep, you had a great run. Now, as far as runners-up, I would probably have to go with Mike Zeck and John Beatty as my other favorite duo of the 80s. Really, I don't know what else you can have to say about them other than the fact that one of their highlighted pieces of work actually got me into comics in the first place, which I touched on in my other video. But I'll go ahead and show you that one right now. This is actually the cover that got me into collecting comics in the first place. I mean, who can say no to that? And the whole thing is beautifully drawn, written, and illustrated. Definitely worth a pickup if you're into these old types. Now, let's see if I can get a good action scene here. It's just a beautiful book. I don't even remember how much I paid for this. Probably an obscene amount back then, because he was still a very hot commodity. And what's funny about the Punisher is how much his comics cost back then. They were real expensive. I think I paid, I don't remember for sure, it's been so long. I think I paid around, oh gosh, I don't know, $75 for the first Punisher. I mean, he was hot back then. I still have it. But I think you can pick this thing up for about 20 bucks now, or maybe even less, like all the old Marvel ones. I don't know how much I paid for the first War Journal, probably just as much. Maybe even 50 bucks though, because there's more of these around than there was of the other one, the regular run. And here's just another really good piece of cover art by Mr. Zeck on the Secret Wars book, which was also a great, great series. But I mean, just look at that. Look at the detail in Dr. Doom there. Yeah, he was just incredible. So those would have to be my favorites. Oh, fun fact is, here's for the short, boring story. I was hanging out with one of my friends in this little out-of-the-way comic store over by where he lived. I'm sure we had to ride 2 or 3 miles to get there, or bikes, whatever, but I always remember this little old guy owned it, and he smoked cigars, like chain smoked them. So the whole place smelled like cigars. I wonder if this book still does. I don't smell it. But anyway, we'd already bought our stuff, and he just mentioned that John Beatty was coming in. And I was like, well, crud, we don't have any more money. You know, what are we going to do? I want to get a signature while I'm there. But he just went and picked out a comic for each of us and gave it to us, so that we had the one that John Beatty inked, and just so we could have it to have him sign. And this is the one that he gave me. Let's see if you can see it real well here. It's kind of a funny issue if you look down here. It's got all the artists and the editors and the writers down there talking, but the comic itself wasn't too important. But the fact that we waited probably another 2 or 3 hours at the store for Mr. Beatty to come in, but come in he did, and we got us a little signature. So great story from my youth, and it's one of the few signatures that I have for a comic book. And just one more note for another artist that I liked back then, Phil Norwood. He had some incredible covers for Dark Horse, specifically the Aliens vs. Predator series, the original one. Just astounding. I used to have them hanging on my wall. They were so good. But yeah, okay, so that takes care of number 2 there. So we got fave character, number 1 out of the way, and number 2, favorite artist, which I made favorite duo, but I digress. And part 3 is coming up. I'm going to splice that footage into the end of this one, so be prepared to be wowed or bored. But I'm not the one to shirk my responsibilities when it comes to contest rules, so part 3 coming at you. So one of the questions asked was, what are some hobbies that you enjoy outside of, you know, comics and just standard geekdom? Well, I had to go out to the man cave to kind of give a, shall we say, bird's eye view of what those hobbies are. And I have many hobbies, you know, and I won't get into all of them. A couple other ones I don't mention here are like chess and hunting, you know, some other just random stuff like that. But for the main ones that I'm into right now, I'll just have to spin the camera and give you a look. And there's the first hobby right there. I haven't got to ride it much lately because it's been very cold up here. But the weather soon approaches the time of nice riding. So this will be my work commuter sometimes when the weather's nice as well, and I'll just go out for hours at a time on the weekends. And if you notice behind it, I have what constitutes basically my other hobby. Another one that's kind of taken a downturn because of the winter months. It gets pretty cold out here, but I also enjoy woodworking immensely. A couple of my main pieces you'll see here. We have my lathe, my little jet here. And I'll use this to turn little things. I even turned a baseball bat once. Just little doodads, knickknacks, candlesticks, ornaments, that sort of thing, you know. I don't have a real big one for doing like furniture and things, but eventually I will have one. And over here, next to my drill press and table saw, and over here you'll see my scroll saw. I'll use this for just doing little things like ornaments and nameplates. Nothing too big goes on here, but it's pretty cool for doing intricate little design work and frill work. On the, I forgot to mention, on the lathe over there, I also turn pens and things. I think I actually have those at another location, so I can't show them to you today, but take my word for it, both acrylic and wood, they look pretty damn good. So here is a close-up of the scroll saw. What you'll do with the scroll saw is you'll put a pattern on some wood, like so. This is just a Christmas ornament or whatever. Tape it, pre-drill it, and then what I'll do is run the blade through the holes here and then cut from the inside. So you'll have one piece of wood that otherwise people think you're doing with like a laser or something, and it's actually done with a little saw. So I'll give you a quick demonstration. All right, you ready? Now it might get a little bit loud here, so if you're wearing headphones, you've been warned. All right, so you take your piece. I'll just use a center hole here because it's the quickest and easiest. Get your blade cinched up, tensioner. You want to hear it make a pretty high ring. Get your air blower over here where it gets the dust out of your way. I got mine set up on a foot pedal. And then you do your dangdest to follow a pattern on the inside. And there you have it. See, and I'm actually stack cutting. I got 2 of them around here, so I'm doing 2 at one time. But you just continue on with that, and I'll just go ahead and do a fast forward, and you can see the semi-finished product on the inside. Forgot to show you the inside. That's what it is so far. I'm gonna go ahead and finish it up. It won't take too long. And there you have it. So, yeah, these make good little gifts or whatever to give to friends or family. Just a fun little hobby you can do. You know, I'm not gonna lie, the machinery is not cheap, but you know, as far as hobbies goes, it's not the most expensive in the world. Now, as far as the lathe, there's a few more tools to buy, and it's a little more expensive to get into, but you can do some pretty cool stuff with this too. I'm not gonna do a whole piece, it takes forever and a day, but I'll just give you an example of the kind of stuff that happens on this thing. So, nothing big here to see, just you can take rough wood, like this is a branch out of the backyard, and smooth it out and make cool cylinders, and on bigger pieces of wood you can do vases and bowls and stuff and all that, but I don't do that too often. So anyway, there it is. Just a few of the things I do out here in the man cave when the weather is decent, when there's not, you know, 30 degrees outside. But anyway, we'll take it back on inside and sign off. All right, thanks for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed that. If you would, shoot on over to my channel sometimes and give it a watch. I'm posting a couple times a week. And some of those that find interest in Jerno's channel might find something they like on mine, because I deal with a lot of geek culture and other things like that as well. So anyway, another big shout out to Jerno for sponsoring this contest. Congrats on 500 subs, man. Doing awesome. One day I'll get there myself. This has been my submission, and good luck out there to all my fellow contestants. Well, the time draws nigh to get out of here, so without further ado, this is Genome out.